welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about something that I'm sure most of you, if not none of you, don't want to learn about, but if you're going to go into higher education with a degree in art, you're definitely going to need to know, and that is charcoal. So basically, for those of you who don't know, I am a transfer student. I spent a year and a half at University of Connecticut, which is a colossal state university with a really small art department. And then I went on transfer to Massachusetts College of Art and Design, where I finished my degree. But because I transferred and because classes don't quite work, I was basically forced to take freshman and sophomore year at both schools twice. So I have had roughly 3 years of being a freshman and sophomore, and I can very safely say you will need to know charcoal because unfortunately that's just part of the standard curriculum. It is the same at all schools, art school, university, whatever, across the country, maybe even the world. But basically, if you are a videographer, sculptor, painter, illustrator, whatever, you will have required classes your freshman year that include doing things like sculpting and videography and things like that. But you will also be drawing, and if you're drawing, you will need charcoal. And for all of you illustrators out there, I'm sure most of you are because you watch my channel, once you go on to sophomore year, the charcoal doesn't end because then you have technical drawing, advanced drawing, figure drawing, all these things that still require charcoal. So whether you like it or not, this dusty black powder is following you for at least a couple years, again, if you're going into higher education. But I also remember even just being in high school and being forced to use charcoal then. So it doesn't hurt to learn how to use it so that you can be at least a little bit less frustrated when you're in class trying to learn what to do. It also gives you the opportunity of focusing on things that you actually do need to learn about and not just fighting the medium the whole time you're in class, because that's not fun for anyone. You might be thinking, why charcoal? Why does everyone use charcoal? And the answer is very simple. It is by far the best tool in terms of teaching, in terms of expenses, and just general cleanliness and easiness. So basically, with charcoal, you have a perfect value range of pure black to pure white. There's no colors. You don't have to worry about teaching color theory to your students. And in terms of expenses and messiness and stuff, it's really quite simple. You're just buying the paper and the pencils. It's super transportable. It's super easy to work with. Like if you're doing oils, for example, you're gonna have to take forever to set up and clean up and learn how to use all the different things. But charcoal is pretty, all right, it's a pencil and a piece of paper. We've been working with this since kindergarten, so figure it out. That's why everyone uses it. I know it's usually not people's preferred method of using it, but hey, that's how it is. So again, rather than fight the system, let's just work with it and then we can have a much better time with it. So some schools are way more lax about how they teach charcoal than others. Mass art is really lax, for example. They just kind of like give you some vine charcoal and some compressed charcoal and say, just kind of figure it out. When I was at UConn, I had a very opposite experience. I had professors who really taught how to use the medium, and they really forced us to use the whole range of supplies that you can get at any kind of art store. So today I'm going to be teaching you the UConn way, which is really going in depth with every single tool that you will need, the strengths, the weaknesses, how all of them work, how you can use them together, etc., etc. So first, let's start off with the basic supplies, which of course starts with the pencils. If you're going to buy just a basic set, you're going to need, honestly, just 4 pencils, the 2H, a 2B or an HB, I prefer a 2B, a 4B, and a 6B. So basically with charcoal, if you don't know, they are arranged by softness and hardness and they're labeled. So H's mean that they're really hard, B's mean that they're really soft, and the higher the number means the more hard or the more soft. HB is somewhere perfectly in the middle, but 2B is also considered medium. You really only want those 4, again, 2H, 2B, 4B, and 6B, because they're going to give you the most range. Hard charcoal, like the 2H, is really good for super light marks because the charcoal is physically so hard that it takes a lot of effort and strength to make a heavy mark. Like, you really gotta try. And because most of us are lazy and we're not trying that hard, it's going to naturally give you a much lighter, thinner mark. It also means that it's not very erasable. So if I have like a 6B, if I give it a good swipe with my knead eraser, a lot of it's gonna come off at once because the pigment's nice and loose and it kind of sits on the surface. The HB is so hard and compact that it just doesn't really want to move much. So some positive things to it. It's really great for doing light sketching. It's good for putting putting in the slight beginnings of the shadow, but it's not very good if you're, say, trying to cover an entire area of your canvas pure black. Would never go with that option. Softer charcoals like the 6B, and I honestly wouldn't go any higher than 6B. You can get like 8B, 10B, things like that. 6 is plenty fine. Those charcoals are really soft, which means it's super easy to make a really dark mark with very little effort whatsoever. It also means that the marks are wider, again, because when you're pressing down, it just kind of like smooshes out, kind of. So you're making thicker marks. It's much easier to erase, and it also makes really dark marks. So you want to use a 6B kind of tool if you're wanting to shade in things that are really dark, really large. That's the goal. But those 4 give you a nice even range, and I will be talking about how to use each one to their best effect in a drawing that I'll be showing later. Next, we're going to be talking about vine charcoal. Vine charcoal is this vine that's super soft and super delicate. It comes in soft, medium, and hard. I strongly recommend getting soft and medium. I don't really know why hard exists, but basically it's ephemeral. It is so soft and light. It doesn't get very dark. It really only, like, the darkest you can get it is like a mid-tone. When you put it on the paper, it's super easy to erase. Like, honestly, if you just put down a mark and blow on it, it will go away into a little puff of charcoal. It's that easy. Or if you put your finger on it, it'll go away. If you rub it into the paper though, it will stay and it will create a nice like gray field. I don't know if you can hear that. There's like a motorcycle outside, whatever. Vine charcoal is also, this is a hot tip, is also a really great tool mixing with the other tools in order to create different sort of effects. For example, let's say you have a super large area that you need to be pitch black for some reason. You can take compressed charcoal, which I'll talk about in just a second, smear it all over the page, get like a lot of black pigment, and then use the vine charcoal, and the vine charcoal will mix with the compressed charcoal and will actually create a completely black, even field with literally half the work. So that's vine charcoal. Compressed charcoal is just these little sticks of charcoal. It also comes with different, softnesses and hardnesses. This is great if you're working on a really large piece and you've got a lot of ground to cover. If you're using just like a regular little pencil, Jesus, that is going to take so much time. So that's a really big time saver if you're working on something like that. It's also great for cool effects and mark making because it's a much wider, chunkier thing. So I can really create some cool line width and different kind of techniques and shadows, good stuff. Next, we're going to talk about erasers. You really need to have 2 different kinds, kneaded eraser and any kind of like hard eraser. A kneaded eraser is great because it is literally picking up the pigment and storing it inside its blobby self. All you need to do is knead it to activate it and then just wipe it down. The kneaded eraser is not only great for cleaning up huge areas and making it white again, but it's also great for visual effects. You can use it to create really beautiful like streaks of light across glass. You can use it for a variety of textures just by like stamping it into the paper. There's so many different things you can do with kneaded erasers. I even remember having a professor, like we were working in class and he would just be like, okay, for the next 15 minutes, only use your kneaded eraser. That's it. And guess what? You can do that. It's not just an eraser, it's a tool. The hard eraser is really good if you're trying to get hard highlights because it's going to create a much cleaner edge. Kneaded erasers, they can't get sharp. You're only going to get like blurriness, which is fine. But you need a hard eraser, something with a hard edge to get somewhere. I have just a basic little stubby eraser, but I also have this cool eraser stick thingy that has these little hard edges and it's just really great for getting in there and working out those tiny areas where you need it. For sharpening your pencils, I actually strongly recommend using some kind of like box cutter or X-Acto blade, not a normal pencil sharpener that you're like twisting into it. Maybe it's because that's how I was taught, but when you're using an X-Acto blade, you can really like make a huge chunk of charcoal ready and available, which means you don't have to sharpen as often and you can create way more gestural marks because you've just got more surface area. If you're using, a little regular pencil sharpener that you're twisting, you're not going to get as many marks and you're also going to be constantly sharpening the entire class because you're going to make like 5 minutes worth of progress and then you're going to have to sit there and twist and it's super annoying. Use your knife, use your blade, whatever it is, and basically whittle until you get the point. I'm not going to show that in this video because there are other people who do a much better job teaching it. I still hack it up sometimes. So that's the general idea. You really want an X-Acto blade. You're also going to need something to smear your charcoal around that isn't your hands. That could be, if you want to be really professional, a chamois, which is like this little thin leather piece of fabric. You can also get some that are non-leather, like a vegan leather kind of thing, if that's what you're into. Or you can just use whatever you have on hand. At UConn, we just used the little paper napkins in the bathroom. Worked just fine. You can also use tissues or whatever. Just don't, for the love of God, use your hands or use your finger or whatever, because even if you've just washed your hand, there is always going to be some kind of oil or dirt or something that is going to get in your pigment, and it's going to look really gross, and you're not going to be able to get rid of it, and it's just a hot mess. Not to mention you're getting charcoal all over yourself, and that's no good. So get one of those, just something to rub the charcoal, and it'll make a nice even whatever you're trying to do, and it'll be less messy for you in the long run. You're also going to need some tape. I personally like taping off the edges, if I like the same way that you do like a regular painting or something. There's really no need for you to do this, but it is so satisfying when you pull it off and you have a nice clean white edge, same as with any other painting. So just putting it out there, you don't need to use artist tape. When we were at UConn, you're going through so many drawings so quickly that it doesn't really matter to like use the fancy stuff, so we just used Scotch tape. Whatevs. Of course, you're going to need some kind of charcoal paper or drawing paper. I don't really know what the difference is between drawing paper and charcoal paper is. I'm guessing that charcoal paper has maybe a hair bit more tooth. But regardless, you're just going to need some kind of drawing paper in order to do the thing. And then lastly is white charcoal. This is a hot take. This is an unpopular opinion. I might get some shit for it, but I hate white charcoal. I think you should avoid using it at all costs. Why? White charcoal is really cool toned compared to regular charcoal, which is warm toned. So even if you're only using it for like a tiny little spot, the white charcoal will stick out so much on your paper, especially if you have other areas where you've just like erased. The erased areas versus the white charcoal areas, they're not going to look anything alike, and it's going to be super distracting to you, to anyone looking at it. You're much better off just being careful with where you're putting your marks and erasing as best as you can, because it just looks ugly. It just stands out so much. I don't even have any white charcoal to use today or show to you guys because I hate it that much. It's a visceral thing. So take that what you will. You know, you might have a professor that asks you to use it or whatever, but I think it's one of those things that it's not needed. So yeah. Anyway, I believe that's all of the supplies. So now we're gonna actually get into our drawing and our still life. So be right back, just gotta move the camera. So here today we have my lovely still life that I just kind of slapped together. This plant is named Miguel. And right now I have my piece of paper. I know it's not terribly large and hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing, but I've already taped off the edges. So I'm gonna be working with this and looking at this. I have my drawing stick, which is going to help me with the proportions. I already have a video on how to make still life significantly easier, which I will link up above or down below or something like that. So you guys really ought to check that out if you haven't already. But first things first is pulling out your vine charcoal. I'm using Winsor Newton Artist Charcoal, perfectly good. In terms of charcoal, I really strongly prefer General's charcoal. It's just the best. It's the best. Here we are, vine charcoal. Snap off a piece. You only need like an inch or so, like this. And then you're just going to smear it all over, like this. Next, you'll be taking your tissue, chamois, paper towel, whatever, and just smearing it across. See how much lighter that already got? Vine charcoal is just something else. And voila. We now have a gray field. If I run my finger across it, it lifts but not really. So now this is a perfectly good flat canvas for us to start with. So why did I do this? As my once amazing figure drawing teacher told our class really, just by having a toned piece of paper or toning your piece of paper, you are literally doing a third of the work. The piece of paper, 1/3 of the work. Why? Because you already have your midtones. Now all you have to do is erase to create your highlights and add some shadows. That's it. You can start your drawing from just base white, but it is so not recommended because you'll work on one object and you'll make the shadows kind of light, you'll work on another object and the shadows will be kind of dark, and then you're gonna realize at the very end that nothing matches each other. other. And then you're gonna have to be like fighting with the background and ruining the details of the foreground because you're fighting with the background, and it's just this horrible thing. So just start off by toning your paper at least a little bit. Vine charcoal is perfect for that. Next, I'm going to take my hard charcoal. So I've got my HB, and look at this thing. It's like a dagger. And I'm going to be using this to very carefully sort of figure out where I want the shapes to go. So like I want my wine bottle to go here, more or less. As I'm doing this, let me explain why I'm using this hard charcoal and not something else. So hard charcoal is really light. I'm putting like regular pressure on the pencil and you can barely see the lines that I'm making, and that is good because the gray field is kind of obscuring it to the point where anyone viewing your work can't see these messy lines, but you, the artist, can, so that you can actually like focus on them later and help you figure out things. And if you need to erase it or whatever, you just rub a little bit more vine charcoal on top of it and you're good. Basically, these marks will become almost invisible by the end of the drawing, all because you're using this hard charcoal. If I was using medium or if I was using soft, I would be making these lines and they would be extremely hard to get rid of or obscure later, so it's not worth it. This is perfect for hard charcoal. So like right now, I can already tell that I'm not a huge fan of where I've placed my things, but literally I'm doing what I just told you not to do with just using your fingers. Sorry kids. But just by smearing around just a little bit more of the vine charcoal, those lines that I was working with before, not a problem, not a thing. It's all good in the hood. I'm not trying to make a masterpiece here for you guys. I love you, but I'm not trying to impress anyone with my charcoal skills today. I'm just trying to show you like how one would do these things. So again, I'm just roughly figuring out where things are going using a really light hand. And notice how I'm holding it at the end. I'm not holding it like this, like I would normally draw. I'm holding it at the edge and I'm using my arm and my shoulders because it will help you control your pencil and use your marks better. Most professors force you to stand and work at an easel, which I don't have a problem with. I know it's really exhausting for some people, and it is exhausting, don't get me wrong, but it's not a bad idea just because it does force you to use your whole arm. Okay, so I have a really sloppy idea of where things are. So now that things are a little bit more sketched out, I'm still gonna use my hard chalk and I'm gonna start to refine some of the lines. Once my lines are more refined, I'm gonna later go in with my medium. I'm gonna use the 2B to create the contour lines for this piece. 2B, the medium, is really great because it's not too hard, not too soft. If I was gonna be using the H for my lines, let's say I make a mistake. How am I ever gonna get rid of that? Huh? No, it would be terrible. If I used like a 6B, it would be smudging all over the place while I'm trying to do shading. So using a medium is the perfect happy balance because if I make a mistake, I still have a chance of erasing it and fixing it, but it's permanent enough that if I get a little carried away in the shading or something like that, it's not gonna budge too much. So that's what the medium is really, really good for. I'm gonna continue working and I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, so now we have our line drawing in with medium charcoal, and this is super sloppy. Like this is not me trying to show off any skills. I'm just trying to get this done quickly so you can see what this is kind of all about. Now that we have our lines, then we can move on to shading. If there is one thing you can take away from this video, just one thing, please, please, please don't use Vine charcoal to do your shading. Don't do it. We had a professor, this was at the very beginning of freshman year at UConn, who gave us a homework assignment, do this still life, view these shadows, and he told us specifically, don't use Vine charcoal to use your shadows. And guess what? 8 out of the 10 students in that class all came in, their drawings done with a whole bunch of Vine charcoal. And because Vine charcoal is so loose and ephemeral, what happened was when everyone took their drawings out of their portfolio and hung it on the wall, just that action left all of these ghost fingerprints along the edges of everyone's pieces. In some cases, the piece of paper brushed up against something, or it brushed up against an arm or another piece of paper or something. And a whole area that they had worked all night on was just gone or smudged or whatever. And then they're complaining during critique yeah, it looked better. And it's well, if you listen to what the professor had said, this would not be a problem. So don't use Vine charcoal. You can use it on top of other things, which I'll kind of explain in a little bit, but it's just not a good idea to only use it. So what I really recommend is using your softer charcoals like the 4B and the 6B, a little bit of the 2B, and using cross-hatching. Some of you guys probably hear the words cross-hatching and think, fuck my life, I hate cross-hatching, it looks so ugly. But here's the thing. When people think of cross-hatching, they're usually thinking of pen and ink, those really tight drawings that you see in dictionaries and encyclopedias and stuff. Cross-hatching looks really, really different when it's used in charcoal. Because charcoal, especially the softer charcoal, creates kind of a softer, more fuzzy line, the lines of the cross-hatching blend together really quickly, and pretty soon it doesn't even look like cross-hatching. That's what you're doing, that's the motion that you're making, but it doesn't look like a cross-hatched piece if you do it right. And also, just having those little bits of cross-haired lines, if they are showing, usually gets you brownie points with the professor anyway because you're doing cross-contour. So don't worry about that. But basically, I'm just going to be going through using my 2B for kind of some of the more medium areas, and my other charcoals, the softer ones, to go through and work on all the shadows. And then later, I'll get back to you guys. We'll talk about highlighting and You'll also notice that I'm kind of moving across the page. I'm not really sticking to one area more than the others because I don't want, what I was talking about earlier, I don't want one area to be too, significantly darker than another area, and another area too light and another area too dark. I'm just kind of going around trying to make the process of things as even toned as physically possible. So right now I'm working on the duck, but I will later get to other things like the mirror and the vases. Another thing I want to talk about just real quick is backgrounds. I talked about this in my portfolio video, which I have a couple of them. I think I said in both. Professors, especially when you're doing portfolio critiques, they really look to see if you're paying attention to the background. So I haven't blocked it in yet, but behind the vases that I'm looking at is my printer. So I'm definitely gonna have to just at least lightly shade in the fact that there is something behind my still life, because I want them to know that I do give a shit. So I'm just gonna keep going along with this, and again, I'll check back with you guys later. So I'm still in the middle of this drawing, this horrible horrible drawing. But I want to just talk a little bit about the highlights and the shadows. By shadows, I really mean like the darkest parts of the drawing. I've got this really, really dark bottle and I've got this really dark duck. And as you can probably tell from the texture of this, I've been using my 6B and my 4B and whatever, trying to just kind of like put down the tone and also using my compressed charcoal stick. But as you can see, you can still see like the rough lines and stuff. If you like that look, if that's kind of your thing, don't worry about it, then that's your jam. But if you're not a big fan and you truly want something like smooth, here's a little trick to do it. So I've already laid down the compressed charcoal, the pencil charcoal. Now I'm going to take the vine charcoal and I'm going to go over that area. I'm going to put the vine charcoal on top, the areas that I want to be really, really black. And then using my chamois, I'm going to go through and rub. Because this is shitty paper and or I did a bad job, you can see that it didn't get very dark. But you can also see that it smoothed out quite a bit. So I'm going to take my compressed charcoal once more, really get it in there nice and dark. I'll use a little bit more of the vine just to help the charcoal particulates move a little bit more, be a little bit more free, and then I can just go in. I think what's happening is my tissue is absorbing the charcoal. Nonetheless, I've done this before and it worked. So that's one way you can do it. And of course you can still take your chamois and kind of blur out some of these areas. I'm gonna like blur out like the background where the printer is and whatever. And I'm gonna use this to also kind of soften some of these areas, like the bottle, to tone down the texture because there's already so much texture in the plant and I want the glass to look like glass. So I'm just gonna go around into the darkest areas and just kind of soften them, make them look like the material that they're looking like. And of course I'm gonna have to go in there and fix things off camera, but I think you guys are getting the gist. Now we're gonna get to the part that I really like, which is using your kneaded eraser to create effects. So you probably can't see my still life at all, but I've got this mirror right here, and the mirror has this really cool like frosted glass edge that kind of glows. So I'm gonna go through with my kneaded eraser, and boom, I'm gonna get that edge right back where it was before, because it was getting a little bit lost in the process. And I can even use my hard pencil to go in and like really like define the highlights a little bit more and add some things too. See, just by like dragging it, you can almost use it like a paintbrush. It's really interesting. So I'm just going through and just adding like these really, really subtle kind of effects. And even in the bottle here, like it is a black bottle, but I'm not gonna just leave it like that. I'm gonna start adding in some of these highlights that are in the bottle to make it, of course, appear like it's glass. So yeah, I'm just gonna keep going through and adding and subtracting as I go, and I'll meet you guys back when this piece is finished. So we're back. Here's my final piece. I know it's not anything terribly great, but look at that edge. Sexy edge. So anyway, just to kind of recap some of the things and talk about some other things. I used the kneaded eraser for some of these like kind of softer highlights and stuff, and the hard one for the other areas. I did add background, which has the printer in it, and I just kind of kept on going, working from one spot to another. The tricky thing with charcoal is not necessarily the medium, it's translating what you see, which for most of us is full color, and translating it to just black and white values. So I'm looking at my still life and there's the dark green of Miguel, then there's black behind it of the bottle, but then there's the printer behind it, and the printer's the darkest thing, and then Miguel almost looks like a highlight compared to everything. When you're doing things like this, just keep squinting, keep comparing values next to each other. This green, how light or dark does it look like next to this object, blah, 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 and just keep working at it and keep going from one area at a time. Don't get stuck on one spot, because not only will it make you more frustrated, but it's not going to do you any good. That problem that you're trying to solve, that visual issue, you're going to solve it by working on other areas, not working on this specific area, which sounds super counterintuitive, but you're gonna have to just trust me on it. I think that's everything I need to say about charcoal. It's a tricky medium, but I think it's very, very good at teaching basic things for beginning artists, which is why it's used so much. And I should put a good disclaimer for this video. This is my way of using charcoal. I do this step with this charcoal, and then this step with this charcoal, and I erase with this, and I do this. I have a very like strict kind of method. Other people are way more loosey-goosey. They don't give two shits. You can be significantly more gestural, or, you know, just kind of smear the charcoal all over the place. Don't use any pencils and use only the compressed charcoal, or only use compressed charcoal, and like you can switch things up and do things differently. This video is not to teach you how I do it. It's just to teach you how you can use charcoal in its best application, using the hard charcoal to the best of its effect rather than trying to use it to fill up an entire black area, you know? Things like that. So hopefully this video gave you a good idea of the general properties of charcoal and how best to use them. If you have any tips and tricks that I didn't cover in this video, please leave them down below, as always. Thank you for watching this far. I'm quite sure that this is a very long, beefy video, but whatever. We have to have those at some point. And I wish you guys the best of luck. I know for those of you who are building your portfolio to get into college, or for those of you who are about to be a freshman or a sophomore or whatever, that this stuff is super boring and you'd much rather work on, you know, cool, colorful concept art and stuff like that. But I promise you these fundamentals are worth it in the end. Like, yes, it sucks that I spent like 3 years doing the basics instead of 2 like everyone else, but it's only done good things for me. So just putting it out there. Anyway, next video, I don't know what it's gonna be, but it'll be good. If you have any video recommendations, requests, leave them down below. Can't say I might do them, but put them down there. Catch me on my other social media. It's all Biana Bova on Tumblr and Instagram and stuff like that. And yeah, I hope you guys have a fabulous day, and I'll see you in the next video. I need to go wash my hands and my legs. But yeah, see you guys next time. Bye.